So the military and the civilian world with the legal world, they're very, very similar as in that if you know who to go to, you can potentially get a lot done just because you're talking to the correct person. If you talk to the wrong person about things, you may just be spinning your wheels.
Welcome to Hot Docket, the show where we talk about winning marketing strategies that have built the most successful law firms.
Join us every 2 weeks for the latest trends and tactics to grow your law firm.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Hot Docket podcast. Today, we have with us Greg Posch, the owner of the Posch Law Firm. And we're going to be talking about veterans in the law, just specifically making the jump from military into the legal profession. But I think that concept of making a jump from one profession to legal is kind of universal. It doesn't have to be military to legal.
Yep. I think we've seen some examples too with police officers and other types of professions that have a good career trajectory into legal.
Yeah. I feel like especially for like personal injury, kind of the interactions, the position where you're going to have interactions with everyday people and not with business owners, like white collar law or whatever, blue shoe, black shoe, whatever it is. I think if it's not that type of profession, it makes a lot of sense to make that leap from like more of a profession like military, like police officer, where you actually understand real world experience and talking to people.
A little bit more relatable, and you understand a lot of the folks that would be your clients.
Yeah. I'm obviously having like a tenuous grasp on speaking today. So I'm going to introduce Greg here. Greg, thanks for joining us. And hopefully you're a better speaker today than I am because my brain is just obviously mush. Greg, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I'd love to hear from you just a little bit more about your journey from Air Force veteran to lawyer.
So I initially joined the Air Force in 2008, and I went through an enlisted 4-year contract. I extended for 19 months, and during that time frame, I was an avionics technician. After that, I went to a safety specialist, which gave me a lot of OSHA Air Force regulation experience. At the same time, I completed my bachelor's, 2 associate's degrees through the community college of the Air Force. And then I transitioned to law school pretty much at the same time of my discharge. I think I was doing an in-processing at law school that I had to take off one day to do an out-processing on my final day in the military. So everything on my end really flowed continuously.
So what was the hardest part of that transition and what was the easiest? Can you give us a little more detail?
I can. The hardest part of the transition was really being prepared to not have the support in the military. When you are in the military, you have all of this support that you could possibly need. You know, these bases, they have everything. They have hospitals, they have libraries, they have car washes, they have anything and everything. And going into the civilian worlds, you know, you have all of these things, but it's not all in one place, and it's not necessarily free, which makes a difference. And then you have to go out to your community. The military, they put everything in a nice little package for you. It's nicely wrapped and given to you. But you have to go out and search for these things when you get into the civilian world, which reduces the support on veterans, and that can make life a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. And I feel like, you know, there's a lot of preconceived notions, I'm sure, going into military life. Like, what were your expectations versus reality getting into the military? I'm sure there was a delta,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Now, I'd love to talk about that same delta for legal. Like, what were your expectations getting into legal? Did they match up to reality? And if not, what were some of those differences?
All my lawyers, I'll put it this way, all my lawyers growing up were essentially from a criminal aspect. Okay. So when I was growing up, I wasn't necessarily, straight and narrow. So I had a lot of attorneys that were in the family they weren't in the family, but the lawyers I had a family attorney, we'll put it that way. So when growing up, it was more so, they charged us a lot of money and when there was trouble, but they always got the job done. And you only really worked with one lawyer. I feel like the landscape's kind of changed a little bit um, with that aspect. So the realizations were, I didn't really have a preconceived notion. I just knew that I wanted to get into a career field where I could help people make a difference, really, and potentially be able to make a decent living.
Well, it sounded like your preconceived notion was lawyers are expensive. Lawyers may or may not be competent, right? They might not really be operating in the best interest of their clients, and that, for you at least, isn't turning out to be true insofar as you've built a practice up where your contingency fee on the personal injury side, I'm assuming, right?
Yes, yes.
So it's not going to cost your client money unless they make a recovery.
Right.
And then can you tell us a little bit more about your other practice too? I know that you're one of those full service firms that have built up a practice across multiple practice areas. So tell us a little bit more about the other practices that you operate in. And especially if you could speak to, how you're breaking some of those preconceived notions you had growing up in those other practices.
So when I first started the firm, I pretty much took everything and anything that I could that I felt I was competent to handle. I did criminal, there was bankruptcy, child custody, divorce, child support, anything on a civil matter that I thought if I could handle competently or do the research in order to learn it and watch court and really just go and use my knowledge to apply it to a civil action, I would take. And one of the preconceived notions that I tried to break was that you can actually obtain good representation without having to worry about how you're going to pay your bills for the next month. If you go out there and you look, you can find an attorney who's willing to help you out and wanting to help in any aspect that they can. And if you go to a smaller law firm, you can get a more affordable attorney. I have more so switched from a generalized practice of law to a more concentrated practice of law with personal injury and estate planning. And I'll probably be getting off into workers' compensation here, probably I'd say within about a year. But breaking these preconceived notions of, I can't afford an attorney is just, that's not that's one of the things that I set out to help with is that you can afford an attorney. Now, yes, you're still going to have to pay the attorney and it's still probably going to cost a little bit of money, but it doesn't mean you have to really worry about, okay, well, am I going to make the mortgage? Am I going to make the car notes? Are we going to be able to get groceries or is the attorney just going to take everything?
Yeah. Okay. That's a great answer. And I want to go on a little bit of a tangent here because you talked about personal injury. And I know you're in North Carolina and you're in one of those like notoriously bad states for personal injury in the country. What is it? I'm not pure contributory negligence.
We are.
So given that you're in one of those areas, I think we should take the opportunity to just hear, like, it sounds like everybody has their own approach to tackling that problem of contributory negligence because it sounds like it's like the first thing that defense will bring up in a case. What's kind of been your approach to tackling that maybe from the start?
Well, so you can't be afraid to get in a little bit of a battle. Underneath the last clear chance doctrine, that's essentially an exception to contributory negligence. So although if you're 1% at fault, if the defendant falls into the clear chance doctrine, which essentially says that the plaintiff put themselves in harm, the defendant seen the plaintiff put themselves in harm, the defendant had the means and availability to escape hurting the plaintiff, and that they did not take the means and the availability to escape hurting the plaintiff, and then the plaintiff got hurt, that's essentially it, is then they are still liable. So just because you're contributory negligent doesn't mean that there's, that's the end all say all. That matter may have to go in front of a jury and you have to prove those elements in a trial. However, contributory negligence isn't the end all say all in the matter. And my approach would be specifically just trying to argue that whether it be a insurance company you're negotiating with, whether that be a third party, the person you potentially are suing, You have to let them know that and show that, okay, contributory negligence is there. Excuse me. However, that's not the law in itself. The law in itself does have the last clear chance doctrine. And underneath, when you put both of those doctrines together, essentially the contributory negligence and the last clear chance, it starts to even out the playing field. So you can't just be tricked into thinking, okay, well, that's it. I'm 1% at fault. I'm barred from recovery. No, you just have to be willing and ready to fight and put up that fight to prove that there was a last clear chance for the defendant not to injure the plaintiff. If you see those elements there.
Right.
I have a question around when you decided to narrow from being a more like general practice down to two practice areas. How did you end up deciding on those two?
So really, it was just supply and demand. I've been pretty fortunate to be able to have a stream of referrals and through other attorneys, through colleagues, through previous clients, through doctors who people get hurt and they get injured through a car crash or slip and fall, or a dog bite or assault and a battery. It could happen in a bar setting from employees on somebody who's been drinking. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to see those cases and see the value in the cases. So a lot of attorneys will turn down cases and they'll say, oh, well, it's not high enough value. Well, that really depends on the attorney. And if you can look at the cases and look at the facts behind the case and look at the injuries, and you can still get people relief. And I think that in North Carolina, there is an issue with attorneys who they may just be focusing on bigger cases, when in all reality, you can build your practice and you can continue to grow your practice on the cases that other attorneys may think have no value, and you can still get you can still get relief for your clients in order to get them some justice, because those cases still have a value, and depending on how willing you are to fight over those cases will really help you grow. And that's really been it for me. I've had lucky enough the referrals and the eye to be able to see which cases I think can bring value to my law firm, and a lot of that has been through personal injury, while focusing. Now, the estate planning is another area, and that was really just educational and learning. But personal injury is probably the biggest bulk of my business.
So on that, does the veteran background give you a leg up in the referral game?
Tremendously. So the military throws you into an environment where you have to deal with different people. Right? You have to deal with all types of races. You have to deal with people who speak Spanish, people who speak, you may have a training linguist in your base. So you have to, women and men, and then you have families. You have your flight may get together. So when you have a diverse military like we do, and you're in that diverse military like I was, then you're forced to interact with people, and you're forced to be able to go out and try to find a common ground. And it doesn't have to be a massive amount of things. It can be I'm a father. It can be I'm a mother. It can be I like country music, right? So if you can find that common ground with people, which the military will all help you do, then you can go out and you can start to network in the career field, and you can start to, whatever career it is, you go talk to people and you try to find their common interest, whether that be a chiropractor and disc bulge and disc herniations and how they, one can sit on top of each other, or whether that be a cardiologist and how a Mediterranean diet helps the heart, or whether that's an OSHA inspector and how, the building codes change, but they're kind of grandfathered in. So if you have steps that aren't even from 100-year-old building, it could be grandfathered in, not necessarily against the building code. So I guess long to short answer is yes, the military helps you communicate and bond with people to a specific degree in order to allow you to excel in the legal field or whatever area interest.
I think you put that a lot better than I did at the start with the blue shoe, white shoe, black shoe firm, whatever it is. The point is that somebody, I'm not to like crap on people who go to Harvard and then join like an elite law firm. I think that's like great too. But when was that person's real world experience? Why can't I say that word? When was their experience, right?
Yeah.
Were they interacting with people who shared very disparate types of experiences from them,
Yeah.
or were they with people that were in the same boat as they were kind of throughout their entire career and college life? So I think you having that background puts you in a pretty distinct position, like unique position.
And, and just to kind of add on to it as well a little bit, people in the military, if someone's in the military and they're watching this, it's nice to know that when things get bad, they can get bad for everybody in the military. So it's not only just a positive common ground, right? If you're on 12-hour shifts and your flight's on 12-hour shifts, or you mess up in the military and then there has to be a unit punishment, that can be a common ground as well. And that's life. When you start to go through legal issues and you start to go through difficult times, a divorce is a divorce. It doesn't matter who you are. Child custody is child custody. It doesn't matter if you have a daughter or a son. If you're going through it, you're going through it. If you have a neck injury, you have a neck injury. So, outside of the positive, the military also helps the members who go in see, they can take the negative and turn it into a positive. And then you can go and still, try to make lemonade out of lemons, I guess you can say.
So can you tell us some of the similarities and differences between your time serving in the military and now your time serving the community as an attorney?
I can. I would say that it is the government is centrally structured very similarly, whether that's the military or the court system, right? Typically, the court is a 9 to 5 open business hours. However, in the military, it can change a little bit because you have shifts in the military: day shift, swing shift, and night shift, right? Or mid shift, I guess you could call it. And all the structure is really the same. You have people in the government who are in charge of certain areas. Like in the court system, the clerk of the court is really the person who helps run the courthouse. In the military, it's broken up more in departments, but if you find that specific person, you can get the answer or get any task accomplished. I'll give you an example. Is that when I was in safety, the person we went to do the debriefs were typically the commanders, whether that be a lieutenant or whether that be a general or whether that be a colonel. If you did a debrief, you went to that specific person. And there would be times where if you had to get something fixed, you may go to the manager in that unit. You may not debrief the colonel, it may be after the debriefing of the colonel, but you would go to a specific person to get something done. So the military and the civilian world with the legal world, they're very, very similar, as in if you know who to go to, you can potentially get a lot done just because you're talking to the correct person. If you talk to the wrong person about things, you may just be spinning your wheels. So that and its time structure are pretty similar as to the opening times, right? I mean, when I was at Luke Air Force Base, there was a hospital, but the hospital was only open from like 8 to 6. Well, that's pretty much like the courthouse, 9 to 5. So there's certain time structures and certain, authoritarian positions that if you seek out, you can handle business the way you accordingly.
Got to pull the right levers. Got to know which levers to pull.
Correct, and that's heavily, in both worlds. And I hate the saying, but a good attorney knows the law, a great attorney knows the judge. I think that's very misconstrued. I really do, because a reputation goes with the legal worlds. However, depending on the levers to pull, you can, accomplish more potentially. And the military does teach you how to do that.
We've talked a lot about the military and your journey from veteran to lawyer in this episode. I think it'd be apt to kind of round out the questions here with what's some advice that you'd give to other veterans who are considering making the move into a legal career?
I would say planning, preparation and planning. When I was going through the process, I started studying for the LSAT, I would say about a year and a half out before my discharge. I took the LSAT about a year before the discharge, and I started putting in law school applications probably, 6, 7 months prior to my discharge. And I had everything timed. I knew exactly what schools would take me in January. I knew what schools that I had to wait for upon my discharge that what I could only get into in the fall semester. I lined up my discharge to be cohesive with my application process and my plans for the civilian life. A lot of military members, they start to put their plans together from what I've seen too late. They start to, uh, they get out and then you may have to wait. So you have dead time, 2, 3 months of just sitting around. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you discharge and you get right into the full swing of things. One, you're going to save money and you're going to keep yourself busy so you're not burning through that cash. Two, it's going to help with your purpose. Military members, they get out, they lose their purpose. They lose their, essentially they can lose their career if they don't have a career to go right into. And mind you, if you're an avionics technician working on F-16s, okay, and then you start to go to be a janitor sweeping floors, there's no comparison. There really isn't, because the F-16 job is just cool. So military members get into I would say, a position where they can have kind of cool lives and they have a nice little paycheck coming in depending on your rank and the structure's there. And if you go into the civilian world and you have no structure to your life, you're not going to be in a position for success. So you need to make sure that your plans align with your timeline and that you can proceed as if you're carrying purpose with you from the military into the civilian world according to what you want at that time. Not necessarily what the military wants anymore, but what you want.
Yep. Maintaining momentum.
Yes.
Considering timelines.
Yes.
I think those are great pieces of advice for anybody looking to make the move.
Correct.
So, Greg, we're going to round out here. We always play a little game. Today, I thought it'd be fun to create a game called Rules of Engagement. What we're going to do here, let's see how it goes. I'm going to give you 3 scenarios, but we're going to go back and forth, give you 3 scenarios.
Okay.
And I want you to tell us what you think an appropriate response might be under our quote unquote rules of engagement. Okay. So yeah, let's see how this goes. So the first scenario, on Google search, someone's running an ad on your firm's name. This is called conquesting, by the way.
Okay.
So you search your name, you search, Posch Law Firm, and whoever, some guy in your market is running an ad to appear before you on Google search. What's your response?
Pick Posch Law Firm.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay. The second scenario is you put up a billboard on the highway and a competitor puts up a billboard immediately before yours and immediately after.
Buyer beware.
And maybe outbid the billboard before them.
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
Sandwich them in.
What I've seen is, when you have somebody who's consistently pushing things in front of your face as well, and if they're trying to essentially step on toes, like what's the reason? That kind of gives you an idea how they may play in the real world, and that's a double-edged sword. If you're the client and and that attorney is biased as to making their fee, then buyer beware. If they could potentially sit there and get you in the door and then just kind of treat you like a deli shop. You're just another sandwich.
Okay, the last one here. An intake, not a client, puts up a bad review for you on Google after you turn down the case because for whatever reason.
Respond.
What's your response?
Or respond ethically as best as you can, letting that potential client and other clients know that there's a limited scope sometimes of what I think I can help with, and that we try to help people as best as we can. But in all reality, if I don't think I can provide the claim of relief for you, or we have disagreements, then that's life. And sometimes it just helps to have people go their separate ways, and that happens in the career field, as opposed to being stuck on that matter. You just have to kind of know what you're dealing with, respond ethically, and let them know, I'm sorry it didn't work out, but for whatever reason or another, I couldn't take your case. I wish you the best of luck.
All right, beautiful. Thanks for playing Rules of Engagement, Greg, and thanks for joining us today. It's been great getting to chat.
Thank you for having me.
So, military. I have a funny story about me in the military, and I'll tell it in a second. But I think it was really interesting getting to hear about, that the value that you could bring coming from a real world experience like the military, the diversity of viewpoint and experience that can then transition into your everyday work.
Yep, I think one thing to bring up that maybe we didn't talk about is just having that background gives you a certain level of trust and authenticity that may be hard on like a branding level for a lot of attorneys to attain. So I think first and foremost, that helps a lot.
Yep, agreed. I'll tell a quick funny story about my military career. So I was considering doing ROTC going into college, and I didn't end up doing like the scholarship program, so I didn't take money, which would have been a whole other story. But I did anticipate doing it. I was like in all the email lists. I was coordinating with. I was part of like a student group. I was doing everything that I needed to going into it. And finally, like on the first day, I was in Northeastern's gym, and in the gym there's a lower level where there's like a basketball court, and that's where everyone was gathering for ROTC. And there's an upper level where there's like treadmills and all these other workout equipment type thing. I was running on the treadmill before ROTC. I realized I was running too long and I was like late. I went over to the balcony, looked down, and saw a bunch of people running into positions and getting yelled at. And I was basically like, nope, not for me. And I immediately walked out of the gym, and I didn't continue. So I had about a one day long military career there.
That's too funny.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty, I would have been a horrible military member.
Why do you think that? You don't think you do well in a structured environment?
I don't think I do. I think I could, I'd be like great being able to get up at a certain time, eat at a certain time. Like I'm very structured in that way, but like being told to do something just to do it, like you just have to do this because I'm higher ranked than you. I wouldn't be able to do that.
And same thing with the hurry up and wait, where when you're the military and it's like a top down approach and you're managing that many people, there's a lot of scenarios where you need things done quickly, but then all the subordinates underneath are going to have to finish that task quick and just wait because the timeline to hit the next thing may take longer. So there's a lot of hurry up and wait, which I feel like might drive you crazy too.
Yeah, that would drive me crazy.
But there's a good reason for it. So it's, I don't know. It cuts both ways.
Yeah. Well, in any case, that was our show. I got to get a coffee. I'm going to get a coffee. Thanks for joining us on Hot Docket Podcast. We'll see you on the next one. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Hot Docket. We're your hosts, Bobby and Andrew, founders of MeanPub, the marketing agency for ambitious law firms.
Have questions about marketing or anything we covered today? Email us at bark@meanpug.com